Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. On the show today, we will talk about the growing landscape of the online gaming industry in India and the need for regulation. Well, last week, the government announced setting up of a committee to regulate online gaming and to identify a ministry to oversee it. Reports suggest the panel will include the CEO of NITI Aayog and also secretaries of the ministries of Home, Sports and Youth Affairs, also Information and Broadcasting, Electronics and Information Technology. The committee has been mandated to study global best practices and then recommend a regime for a uniform regulatory mechanism. Besides, the panel will also develop a broad structure of the proposed central laws if required, consult experts and submit a report in the next 3 months. The development comes at a time when more and more states across India are bringing about legislations seeking to bring about some order in the online gaming sector. Recently, the government of Rajasthan brought out a draft bill in order to regulate online games, specifically the fantasy games. And earlier as well, states like Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka have passed laws banning online games, although they were quashed by state high courts on grounds that an outright ban was unfair to games of skill. And more recently, during the budget session of Parliament, the Online Gaming Regulation Bill 2022 was introduced in Lok Sabha by a Congress member from Kerala as a private member's bill. Now, this bill sought to maintain integrity in online gaming and introduce a regulatory regime for online gaming as well. So, is there a need to regulate the online gaming sector? If yes, what kind of regulatory mechanism would help delink the good, bad and the ugly of the online gaming industry? To share their perspectives on these aspects and much more, I'm joined on the program today by a distinguished panel. So, let me first introduce them to you. I have with me Mr. Roland Landers. He's CEO, All India Gaming Federation. I'm also pleased to welcome Mr. Ojas Vipat. He's CEO, Mayhem Studios. And Khushbu Jain, Advocate Cyber Law, Supreme Court. Thank you to all my guests and welcome to Sansad TV. Mr. Landers, coming to you first because, you know, the online gaming landscape, as we all are seeing, has been witnessing an exponential rise, particularly in recent years. In fact, it is the fastest growing segment today in the media and entertainment market. Help us and our viewers, in fact, share with us a brief overview on what has led to this sector growing by leaps and bounds in recent years.
Thank you, Tina, for having me here. So, as you elucidated, the industry itself, I must mention, is not very old. It's, very nascent industry. It's only about 12 years old in India. However, the initial steps for the growth that is witnessed today were put in place. Actually, there's a direct correlation between the growth of the industry and the Digital India initiatives, led by the Honorable PM, because most of the gaming is mobile-led as far as India is concerned, and hence the entire growth is coming from the smartphone penetration and the affordable data, the number of internet users, etc., which is propelled by the Digital India initiatives. So now coming to the last, I would say 4 to 5 years, we've seen almost a hockey stick like growth, and that is when the entire ecosystem, I would say, starting with the game developers like Ojas sitting here with me on the panel, and then the investors who are backing those gaming products, the businesses, the startup community that that looked at setting up online gaming businesses in the scale gaming space, and then the gamers, the adoption by the gamers themselves. So if you look at this entire ecosystem, it is it has been put in place, and in the last 4-5 years, even much before the pandemic, those growth initiatives were put in place. And if you look at the numbers, it's extremely heartening to mention almost 400 million gamers as per the EY Fiki Frames report for 2022, and the industry over $1 billion. I'm talking about the pay-to-play formats, and then expected to double by 2023. Likewise, the number of game developers and studios nearing almost 300. So the numbers are enormous. Even if you look at the investment community, in the last 5 years, there's been a total of almost about 5 billion that have come in. But in the last 15 months itself, about 1.7 billion US dollars that come into the industry. So I think, and as AIGF, as the apex industry body for online skill gaming, we are working in the self-regulatory mechanism to set up,
Okay.
best
So
practices and
I'll come back to you on the
and,
regulation bit,
and
but first,
both...
before that, let me go across to Ojas and understand, because what, Mr. Landes is suggesting, Ojas, is that the growth for the online gaming industry was set even before the pandemic. The pandemic just propelled the growth, and what we are witnessing is an exponential rise in the gaming industry, because of which the Prime Minister, on not just one occasion, but several times, he's been heard promoting self-reliance in this industry, and that's exactly what your development studio has done. So help us and our viewers, get some sense on what Mayhem Studios is all about, and because you've also been credited with the first Made in India Battle Royale game, what is it and how has it evolved?
Thank you for that. So Mr. Landis is absolutely correct. The gaming industry has been growing for a long time. I would say the last few years, along with digitization, along with people getting access to UPI, it's not just an industry which is about growing in terms of numbers of users. It's also growing in terms of monetization. What we are looking at now is just like any other industry in India, be it entertainment in general or movies or some of the other stuff. Indian authentic stories are very, very popular amongst the local audience. In gaming, we see the same pattern repeating. This is a $5 billion industry in the next 4 or 5 years. And we are expecting that a lot of these games that people love, play, and pay for will come up locally. And that's what we are trying to do at Mayhem Studios with our first game called Underworld Gang Wars. So the idea here is to grow the industry, grow the user base, and also create more jobs locally, bring these specialized skill sets into India, enable these growth communities, enable the entire ecosystem for us to stand up on our own and then go global from there. Because it is not just about the Indian market, I would say. It's also about how do we take these games, these authentic stories, these great IPs to the world.
Okay, so I'll come back to you on the scope and potential and the future of the gaming industry in India. So as you see, the infrastructure is rapidly growing. There is more and more awareness about this industry, and we are seeing particularly in terms of investment, the growing infrastructure as well. But going across to Khushbu Jain, before we begin talking about regulation, Khushbu Jain, do we have distinction in India between what is game of skill and what is game of chance? Are those users who are into online gaming aware of what exactly these two are?
It's a very valid question that you have asked. See, there is a clear distinction. There have been a lot of judgments, plethora of judgments, which define that what exactly game of skill and what exactly is game of chance. And wherever the shift is towards the game of skill, it's a legal thing. If it's a game of chance, it's gambling, which is prohibited under the State Center Act and also the state law being a state subject. So anything which has a element of which is a chance based, that's purely gambling. Now definition has come up. Yes, there have been different judgments which have given a light that wherever you apply a skill, that is wherever there is an application of mind, is what we consider game of skill. Wherever there's a chance that there is no application of mind, but it's just a chance, that considers as game of chance. And which is, as I said, it's gambling and it's illegal.
So when there is clear-cut distinction, why are we seeing more and more states actually going for a complete ban on online gaming?
Yeah, coming on that, see what happens is, because that game of skill and chance, there is a very thin line what exactly is game of chance and game of skill. People have started making game of chance and converting them into a game of skill. I'll give you one very basic example. Let's say a very small game which is based on skill, that you put a number and then some number will come and you have already put your bet on one certain number and you win. Now let's say you win, or you play any game and you win. That's purely a chance based. But to make it skill, to come under the radar of being legal, being a game in India, what they've done is they'll put a very basic question to it, because you're replying to a question, that becomes a game of skill. So people have started using, because of this aspect of legality and illegality, gamers have become, the industry is growing a little more a step ahead and converting game of chance, which is purely a game of chance, into a game of skill, in a way that that thin line is being that vagueness is being utilized or maybe misutilized by the industry. Hence all the states have started using that. No, anything which is online gaming, good or bad, it's not good. Whereas impact on youth is concerned, impact on children is there, money is lost. And because this is an unregulated space, a lot of times you see there are offshore industries which are in India, and when the money is lost, nothing can be done by the law enforcement. There's a second aspect that comes. A lot of these apps which are not registered, which are not licensed, which are not running from India, and that thin line about in a non-licensed space, the thin line about gambling and gaming. What happens is a lot of them also promote loan apps which are not legal in India. People end up buying it because you're buying, or you end up getting points for getting points, or certain levels you start paying money, little money. Now, whenever you lose, or there is some mishap, or the money which is saved in your wallet that has been taken away, whatever, anywhere when you want to go to law enforcement, the situation comes that these entities either don't exist in India, or there is no proper license, or the industry itself is not coming up with the proper rules and regulations. KYC, they're not complying with basic norms of child protection. So there are a lot of gray areas in that, and in order to look into that, and so much of discrepancy happening, the right move was to bring in one holistic online gaming regulation in India, where industry also understands that okay, this is the law, one has to abide with this. People also understand, and also to curb all the misdoings happening in this space.
Certainly.
The space is growing. I mean, you cannot kill the space. The space is growing. The best is to bring in the license and maybe make it more favorable for users and also for the country.
Absolutely. But how effective, Mr. Landers, will a uniform regulatory mechanism be? What we are seeing is different states are interpreting it in different ways. They are coming up with laws, which of course would be fair to one, but unfair to the others, and because of which we've seen several of the high courts have actually quashed these laws. Now, Rajasthan has come up with a draft law. What do you think a uniform regulatory mechanism will do? Will it solve a lot of these problems, especially relating to the grey areas that Khushbu Jain just pointed out?
Yeah, so I agree with what Khushbu said. And as the AGF, we laud the move that, the center has undertaken. In fact, as the Federation, we have been making those representations over the last several years, actually, now. And we're happy to see that, it culminating into something practical. Having said that, one of the things that, the states, because of the lack of awareness, and one important thing that we need to keep in mind is that there is this large gray/black market from overseas. And we've been pointing this out repeatedly, and consistently, that steps need to be undertaken to stop these. Most of the problems that Khushbu mentioned emanate from there. Coming to the online skill gaming side, which are Indian registered companies and have the self-regulatory framework, I think it has been working well because we have player protection and responsible gaming mechanisms under the AIGF Skill Games Charter. What will happen is when you have, let's say, a central guidelines, I would say, rather than regulation, these would, enable an ecosystem that benefits each and every constituent or stakeholder within this ecosystem that I mentioned at the outset. And then these state by state, interpretations and their own licensing and their own proposed regulations would then these guidelines that are central would then take care of much of that. And I think this entire ecosystem will benefit. I was going to say that at the outset, that if in the self-regulatory environment, we've seen such phenomenal growth. Imagine if there are central guidelines, just as Ojas mentioned, this could really, reach its potential in the next 4-5 years and be a major contributor to the nation building.
Absolutely. So what happens, what this task force actually, opines and submits in its report is something that we'll have to all wait and watch. But Ojas, when we talk about self-regulation, what are the rules of the game? What is, I'm sure the industry would have some unwritten rules that it has to follow. So being, an indigenous company, what is it that you are bound by?
Sure. So before I answer that question, I would like to clarify that there are multiple kinds of gaming companies and games out there, right? Like it's not a blanket online skill gaming company that we are talking about. There are free-to-play apps there. There are some other apps as well, games which are monetizing in very, very different ways. At Mayhem Studios, for example, our focus is free-to-play. We will be free-to-play. We will have cosmetic assets that the users can purchase. They can buy things like lungi, they can buy things like a Kolhapuri chappal inside the game, which are pretty much like your typical fashion products that are available physically. You get those digitally, right? So I think it's a very nascent and sunrise industry, and it is very, very required for us to understand the nuance of what we are doing. There are companies which operate in a certain model. There are companies which operate in another model, and that distinguishing them and making sure that the regulatory bodies and the government notices that not a blanket way of approaching this will work will really help, because companies like us and companies like global companies which have become big in the industries are companies that have produced real IP on their own, that have made their own products and their own stories and their own games, much like what we are doing, to promote and facilitate user imagination, creativity, create jobs. And these are not companies that are covered by the current law framework, because they are just like any other entertainment product where the user simply pays for a digital asset. Coming to your question about self-regulation, there are always all companies have a moral and an obligatory responsibility to make sure that all the platforms that they distribute on, they are meeting their requirements. And a lot of these platforms have age restrictions, have user protections. The payment gateways also have mechanisms to make sure that any kind of fraud, cheating, etc. are all caught. So these are already things that the companies are taking notice of. In the end, it's not just a question of making the market grow or making the company grow, but it is also a question of how do we give the users the best experience? How do gamers really, really love the products and use them for years? So there is a lot of self-regulation. If the central mechanism keeps the self-regulations and what the industry is already doing in mind and informs the decision based on that, that would really help every single player in the industry.
Absolutely. So while it's going to be beneficial for the industry, Khushbu Jain, the larger concern here is that it's directly and adversely impacting youth, especially the children who are being driven to either addiction or suicide. Every now and then we keep hearing we keep reading in newspapers, we keep hearing in news about addiction stories to online gaming, particularly the children who now have unlimited access to internet. Going forward, what kind of regulatory mechanism will sort of, delink the good, bad, and the ugly of the online gaming industry?
So coming directly on your question, I think that's a society, but what as a regulation or what what regulation and industry can do together is, yes, there are instances of toxic environment on these platforms. Managing inappropriate behavior is another thing which has been seen over there. Age limit, verification, sharing of sexual exploitation and abuse materials on these platforms, depicting. There have been instances where women are shown in an inappropriate manner, though they are being covered by the IT Act, they are covered by different acts in India, but nonetheless, there are instances which happens. So looking at all these things which are existing in the industry, a light touch regulation is what I would say, that a light touch regulatory approach can play a very significant role for the people, for the user, for the society, and at the same time will also help or play a very significant role in growth of the gaming industry. See, the industry is there. I think both my speakers earlier were talking about that there are offshore entities here. So just by bringing in or curbing or maybe closing your eyes will not help. There has to be a recognition. Tax is another issue which we are losing on. The gray market is there, and more the gray market, more the illegal activities over there, and it's difficult for you to implement the basic rules and regulations which exist in your country. So why not create that space even for the industry to understand that this is the space. Another space that will come in the future would be data protection. Heavy data has been taken. The maximum people on these platforms are children. If you take children's sensitive data, how things are happening. So see, there are a lot of things which are there which have to be looked in. That's why I said that not an heavy, but at least a light touch regulation is the need of our. See, not to forget, I'll again harp on this online game or fantasy game or any other games which you talk about are fast becoming trend and played in a very significant way. Whereas our country is concerned, especially with the mobile first population which we have, the growth I think was being spoke by you that there is almost $2.4 billion of gaming market was there, whereas 2020 was there, and Asia is the top region for mobile and gaming industry.
Yes.
Now, whereas fantasy sports market, it's almost 200 companies and 130 million users and market of 34,000 crores. So look at this market, we cannot close eyes, but yes, enabling a uniform national regulatory environment by the center can encourage. Also statewide, it creates a lot of issues. So enabling a uniform national regulatory environment by the center can encourage responsible gaming, ensure, I'll repeat, responsible gaming, ensure consumer protection through measures such as age rating, regulatory certainty, such as regulatory environment will allow growth of fantasy sports and industry, also maximize the potential in this sector. And also there is a need for a parent or a nodal ministry that enforces this regulation. I think another thing which the bill also proposes is a committee where is a place where one can approach. So I think overall, yes, uniform national regulatory environment is the need of the hour.
Absolutely, and that is going to promote responsible gaming, Mr. Landers. But going forth, will there be a challenge because the manner in which this industry is evolving, even if there is a central legislation, it wouldn't be possible for the laws framed today to actually be changed or, keep pace with the changing technology. So how are we going to meet that challenge?
Yeah, that's a good, point, Tina. And just to qualify, the earlier question that you asked, just wanted to qualify that, we at the Federation at least look at the pay-to-play formats, which include, fantasy gaming, the skill-based card games, and also the casual gaming, quizzing, etc. And most of these, and for these games, clearly, at the outset, it is only 18 plus and above. So it is for adults only. Now, coming back to, your question, see, technology will always outpace regulation, right? And that has been the case for many years. And as we see, technology taking shape in gaming also, with, the metaverse now, Web 3.0 happening, pay to play, going to, play to earn formats very soon. And as Ojas mentioned, there are different types of monetization. As I mentioned, we are focusing on the pay to play side of the business. Now, technology will always outpace this. But as we see it, if there are, these light touch central guidelines / regulation, then at least, there will be uniformity. And that's what's important. Because when you grow businesses, the important thing to keep in mind is stability. Now, I was telling you that, in the self-regulatory environment, the investors have backed this sector so very bullishly. And hence, if there is, certain central guidelines and practical, clear-cut central light guidelines, then much more can be done, And I think that with the technology, of course, there would be some need to be done. growing technology. But I think it's a great step. And as I mentioned at the outset, we completely back it and support it, and we will be supporting the task force in whatever way possible.
Okay, so that was about the regulation, and how it goes is something that we'll have to all wait and watch. But one final comment from you, Ojas, on the future of the gaming industry. Of course, we've seen how it has grown in recent years. It has a huge potential in terms of not just creating jobs within India and making India Atmanirbhar in this particular sector, but also becoming exporter of these games. So, what is the way forward if you want to become not just consumers, but also producers of the games for other countries to consume?
That's a very good question. And Tina, this is exactly the point where we need to back the local industry, make sure that there are rules and regulations, and there is industry-wide tailwinds that the government can provide. If you look at other countries, the way the companies have become global behemoths is because of a lot of local support, because of a lot of backing from the government, because of regulations. There is talent in India, there is market in India, there is no dearth of stories in India, and there is no dearth of ideas and creativity in our nation. You can see our trailer for Underworld Gang was to take a look at what we are also trying to do there. The main challenge is to create a long-lasting monetization strategy which can sustain the business. If gaming industry in India takes off, it will be on the back of great products and great games which are backed with great monetization, so that these businesses can become sustainable. Once they are, there is no limit to where we can go. I mean, there are plenty and more examples of, in general, entertainment being popular from India globally. There are movies, there are songs, there are a lot of things that Indian culture is known for.
So, there is no dearth of ideas, but responsible and sustainable are the key words here going forth. That having been said, I'll have to wrap up the discussion. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program, sharing your thoughts, your views with us and our viewers. It was indeed a pleasure to have you on the program today. So that's it from us on this edition of Perspective. Thank you to all our viewers as well for their time. See you again same time tomorrow. Until then, take good care of yourselves and keep watching Sansad TV.